So Carenza, welcome to another Time Team Tea Time. I'm very pleased Dig School is doing well. Current numbers, how many people are out there?
Oh, we've got over 1,200 registered users and over 60,000 kids covered by it, so across the globe. So I hope they're enjoying it. We're getting good feedback.
If people have got kids at home and still looking for something to do and taking an interest in history and archaeology, then get in touch with Dig School.
Today, absolutely, and they can start from square one now, so they're all still online. So if they've missed it, they can just start at the beginning or start wherever they want, whenever they want.
Fantastic. We're going to be talking about Llangorse today. I have 3 images from Llangorse. You in an amazingly oversized dry suit, standing up to your hips in Welsh lake water, the black goo that you could see around those timbers, and the strange goings on that involved the making of the wooden boat, which I'm going to be talking to Damien about. But what are your memories of Llangorse?
One of my most enduring memories, I think, is the one that never made the television programme, was when we were trying to film the opening session. When Tony, there was a letter, and of course those letters were always a bit sort of not entirely quite what they seemed in the first series. There was a letter from, was it Mrs. Mitchell or something? Tony read this out and it said the island, she knew the island was man-made, and he read it out and he said she knew the island was marmalade. And it's not that funny. I just completely got the giggles on that. I can remember it took us ages to film that scene and they never used it, so it was clearly useless. So I think we were all quite, up really, because we'd done the first 2 time teams in series 1 just for those first 2 commissioned, and then we came back in the autumn and did the 3rd and 4th, and we hadn't really known whether the 3rd and 4th were going to happen, so we were all kind of really excited that it looked like Channel 4 were reasonably happy with it. So I remember it as being a very sort of happy shoot, very sort of optimistic. I think the enduring memory is, yes, just water, really. Water and landscape, I think, because there was a lot of wading about in the water and digging through the water. We spent a lot of time just sort of, literally sifting through stones from silt and looking for artifacts in the silt, in a foot of water around the edge of that crannog. And, I haven't ever been in a dry suit before. It looked big, but they're quite constricting and they're quite hot and sweaty, and yet you're sifting through this soil, and it's just a bizarre excavation technique, and you just never knew what was going to turn up. And we found that amazing ring, that beautiful shale ring, which I don't think we really made enough of in the programme. I think if we'd found it in a slightly later series, we'd have made a reconstruction and we'd have probably got it out of its bag, at least have a decent look at, because it's an amazing find. And that was just, I think that was one of the high points of that moment, when just out of all this unpromising silt and mud, this kind of ring appeared.
I think it might be useful at this point to remind ourselves that, crannogs are fairly rare things in England, Wales.
Yeah, I think in England and Wales, I think it's the only one, I think. They're certainly very, very uncommon as a man-made island, which is, entirely artificial. Yeah, and I don't, we didn't, I think, there was that tantalising hint there might be an Irish connection with it, but of course we don't have the written documentation really to know anything about the movement of people in that terms of that, was it someone with Irish connections who introduced the idea there, but a tantalising idea and a really special site.
And I think there was a sort of, all the time through the programme, was that slight sense of the history of Wales. I think it's the Kings of Brecon, if that's the right pronunciation. And
that was how Robin pronounced it, wasn't it?
And we had that.
Which is Brecon now, of course.
Yes, Brecon, and that we were near to some kind of ancient history there, and that in fact one of the kings of Brecon in 896, we know that Alfred had sort of taken one of the Welsh kings under his wing to an extent, and possibly even given him a diplomatic gift. I didn't remember this because I think it came out much later, but in the recent article in Current Archaeology, which is a fantastic article, they talk about finding a bundle of fabric which turned out to be a quite exotic Byzantine themed sort of cloak or tunic. And Mark Redknapp, who was central to our digs, and I think you were standing alongside him in the soup for quite long periods, said that, you know,
paddling, I think would be the word.
yes, paddling, and he said that you know, this may well have been that remnant of a diplomatic gift given by Alfred to a Welsh king with whom he could establish a good relationship. I think we also looked at some ogham, which was later.
Yeah, there was that gravestone, wasn't there, in the churchyard, which we looked at as well. There was, and talked a bit about that. But again, I think the whole thing had a slightly sort of the tantalising side in a way, because of that we kept getting these little clues. So when we were looking at that sort of circular enclosure, and that it turned out not to have anything in it. Then we had a look at the churchyard. Then we looked at the churchyard the other side of the lake, and there were these little sort of tantalising clues that kept sort of almost it's like ink blots almost, they're sort of emerging from the mist, and we never quite got anything terribly definite from it, but there was that hint of activity all around the lake, really, in that period where Christianity is sort of establishing itself and growing and becoming more and more a strong way that sort of people were holding themselves together, as it were. And you know that, but it never quite crystallized. We never quite got it. So it was quite a sort of just a very sort of tantalizing program, really.
And I think one of the things that made it slightly more clear to me what might have been there, I happened to have visited Switzerland and looked at the museums of the lakeside villages. And here there were just large numbers of settlements, effectively on stilts, on the lakeside. And the number of finds that came from the mud that's left at the bottom of Lake Geneva was extraordinary. And there's some very romantic reconstructions of these families with these walkways out, which can be presumably defended quite well. And then there you are in essentially a hut in the middle or the edge of a lake with boats around you. And you felt that there was a sort of style of life here. I'm not sure everybody would have quite enjoyed that proximity to the water and the waves and the rain and the wind. But that image of that lifestyle, I think, was quite unique for us. I don't think we ever excavated anywhere else like that.
We did another crannog in Scotland, didn't we, a few years later? Yeah, I think, I must admit, you look at a site like that now and I think, well, you know, it could have been quite a sophisticated building. I doubt it was used. It would be really interesting to have done more excavation and found more about what actually might be in the centre of the island and sort of section it and really looking for silt. One wonders if it is very much just for special occasions when you would process out there and kind of have some kind of feast or some kind of ceremony, or perhaps both, or perhaps it was once a year when people paid their homage to their overlord or something, on this place sort of suspended above the water in the lake. It felt, I think, more now looking back on it, it feels sort of more potentially like a special place than just the sort of settlement. I mean, never really made much sense really as a defended site, because actually retreating into a middle of a lake is hardly a brilliant strategy for anything, is it? It's kind of
well, I think when we did Flag Fen with Francis later, that kind of liminal, Francis used to describe them as, it's not on the land, it's not in the water, it's sort of somewhere in between. And certainly the possibilities of deposition, deliberate deposition.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we find so many archaeological artifacts in watery situations, and again, you've got that thread of sort of Christianity and potentially paganism sort of intertwined in those sorts of locations. And of course, there's lots of associations within early Christianity with water, and you've got symbols of fishes and things, and it's just tantalising because you just want to know a little bit more about it. I mean, maybe it'll come. And then you look at something like Must Farm, which has turned up since the years since we were at Llangorse, and you see the richness of what does survive in those wet contexts and that context. And again, it makes you wonder what else might actually be under there at that crannog at Llangorse that's got sealed perhaps by the fact that there's actual stone depositions on top. There might be silt layers underneath that are intact.
And I think
maybe they've done some more digging, I don't know.
And I think since we were there, Mark has gone back on a number of occasions with the Museum of Wales, and they've found things like reliquary arms from portable reliquaries, which are rather nice to see, which are in that they're in that article, and pieces of bronze from what looked like quite sophisticated bowls. And there's a sort of richness there.
Well, that fits then, doesn't it? Yeah.
And what do you remember about the boat? Did you have much to do with the boat during the filming?
I didn't have a great deal to do with manufacturing, but I was involved in the kind of sailing of it. I can remember because I was one of the ones that had a dry suit, sort of launching it into the water first of all. And sort of moving it around there. I have a memory of actually sitting in it, but I'm not quite sure if that actually happened or whether I've just invented that. It was very low in the water. I remember it had about, 3 or 4 centimetres, I should think, of clearance. And if you both lean to the side at the same time, you did not straight over.
What was interesting about that freeboard notion was that they buried it in water subsequently to preserve it. They just stuck it back in the lake. It came up, I think, in 2016.
Oh wow! So nearly 20 years later. Yeah.
In good condition, a few cracks that they filled with sheep's wool and moss.
Yeah.
But it had lost quite a lot of its weight during that period, surprisingly. And once it was lighter, it actually became a lot more manageable because it was virtually green when you guys were in it.
Yes. And you did wonder whether, because it was so fresh, whether actually, given a few years, it would have seasoned off and twisted and become unusable.
Well, I think... I think Damien and his crew were very aware that you had to slap various foul-smelling sheep's fat and cow fat on that green wood to stop those cracks opening up. I think he called them shakes.
Right, that bit I don't remember.
But it seemed like when they brought it out of the water again and dried it off, suddenly it had lost its weight and it was able to do 3 miles an hour across the water with one person paddling. But I remember the sensation of seeing it, and it seemed to have a mind of its own when we put it on the water. It sort of zigzagged off across the...
Well, I remember Phil and Tony trying to steer it around, and that really didn't look like that was working at all. That was, it's difficult to get it to go in any direction, and with a constant sort of stalked by the jeopardy that it was going to capsize at any moment.
And I like the fact that what that program for me certainly did was showed you just what can be preserved by the water. That on sites that are wet sites, there's a remarkable amount of black goo, wood fragments. They found oak timbers, brushwood flooring, and there it all was. And of course, that's the stuff on dry land which we use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always think the Lord of the Rings film's quite a good illustration of that. When you're at Rohan, everything that's filmed in Rohan is effectively sort of your Anglo-Saxon hall, really. And you just look at that and think, well, everything is organic. The hall's made of timber, the clothes are all sort of linen and leather, and you've got, but it's a very rich environment. and you know, it's stuff like the wool and the leather and the you know, timbers and the you know, everything, even the kind of food stuff in pots and things like that. You know, you've got wooden pots that have got stuff in them. You know, and it's the stuff we use all the time. It's so much easier to work than stone or metal. You know, when people always say, well, what are the earliest tools that man made? And people always go, well, stone, because it's the Stone Age. But actually, it's stuff made of, you know, wood, and the much more usable organic stuff is much earlier. And it survives in water. You know, I've never been a wetland archaeologist, but well, I worked on the Somerset Levels for a bit, and that itself, you know, that was amazing because, you know, there you've got these trackways which are laid down across the kind of the marshes, and you know, they just survive. You know, I mean, they're soft as butter in some cases, but they survive because the watery conditions with the lack of oxygen preserves them. And you just think we miss so much on the dry land site. You know, so much is just gone, but we've got to make the best of it.
And two things I'm if my memory's not playing tricks, I have a memory that the couple who owned the farm opposite, who were really helpful during the shoot and everything, and I think we had an incident room there, I think they used that boat to go to their wedding or something like that.
Really?
I think that we'll have to find that out, but there's something like that. And the other nice personal thing was, I think that was our first Time Team baby, because Damien's partner, Dana, his wife, was about to give birth, and Damien came down for 2 days to help us build the log boat and to organize the log boat. And that young man is now 26, 27. So it was that long ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. And the other thing I remember enjoying about it actually was the sort of doing a bit of field walking in the landscape around it, and actually having time to do that, and just sort of, I remember sort of Nick and myself just sort of walking across this field, sort of picking up odd bits and pieces and just sort of musing about the landscape. It's a very mindful thing, field walking, I think. You know, you're just in the zone, you're just focusing on what's on the ground. All digging really is about mindfulness.
I think that it's nice memories, and as you said, I think it was for Time Team, it was a slightly more elegiac period. When you compare it with some of the later programs, there's quite a few more edits and everything speeded up a bit. I think we were still slightly more poetic about the way we handled things in those early days, and that Welsh atmosphere and the magic of the lake and the local.
It was misty and slightly rainy all the time, wasn't it? There was a sort of soft focus quality about the whole program, really.